Okay, Stacey, so we're going to do part three. It's going to be the last of our videos. And I wanted to talk with you a little bit about role models and culture and language. So, were there any role models that you had growing up, like Indigenous role models or people that you look up to now?
I guess my role models were more my parents and my uncles and my aunties growing up. My grandmother especially. She died at the age of 96, but she was a very inspirational woman. She was an Aboriginal woman who was working back in the years of the stolen generation.
Right.
When children were forcibly removed from their parents.
Right.
Because they may have had white blood.
They were able to pass them off as white children.
Yeah, that's right. So my grandmother married my grandfather, and they moved from station to station because they worked and kept a home on the stations and things like that. My mum's family was never subjected to removal. So, but I have to give hats off to my grandmother because she raised 12 children of her own and fostered 63 children.
Wow, that's
over
pretty
the
amazing.
years. So, to me, she's wonderful.
You mentioned a few things about women in regards to you take the travel name of your mother.
Of your mother, yes.
Something else you said about that you mentioned your grandmother. There's something else you mentioned, I can't remember what it was. But do women have a particularly strong profile in Indigenous
Yes, they do.
population in Australia?
I guess women sort of are the backbone of Indigenous families. The men, they take care of the material stuff, I guess. Like food, the essentials. I shouldn't say material, essential stuff, sort of food and that sort of stuff. But I think that women play a very important role. They are the providers, they are the givers, and in Aboriginal culture, it's not just the mother's responsibility to raise their children, it's also the aunts and the uncles.
Right, so it's more of a group effort.
Yeah, it's more of a group effort to taking care of the kids.
Right. What about thinking about the current times, almost in 2016, are there any very well-known Indigenous people that you think are doing good things or that
I guess
you look up to in a way or identify with?
Yeah, I guess Jessica Mauboy, those sort of, and the other lass that was in Sapphires, I can't remember her name, sorry, but I think that they're younger than me, but I think that they've really paved the way for the next generation to come through and to do something with their lives and realise that, they don't have to sit in the background and they can come forward and make something of their lives.
I periodically watch Kathy Freeman's 400-metre Olympic win.
Yes.
I always get a kick out of that.
Yes.
Because I think that's probably one of the best moments.
Yeah, Kathy Freeman's also, she's an excellent role model. She's a brilliant woman. She's a great model for anybody, any Indigenous Australian girl, especially across Australia. And she still is, she's a woman that's connected to her people and connected to her culture. And
she's from Queensland, right?
Yeah. So, she still pops up and with working with kids and things like that.
Right.
So, definitely she'd have to be one of my role models.
Yeah. Lastly, I want to talk about language. All across the world, a lot of people speak English, but everyone has different words that they might use in specific areas. So I was curious to know, is there particular phrases or slang that you feel like you use that some other people don't use?
Yeah, I guess, sort of across Australia, a lot of us speak broken English within families. There are similar words that have different meanings in different parts of the country. I guess, language has really died off since colonisation, and there's probably about 6 to 10 languages that are still around.
In terms of Indigenous languages from the past
across Australia.
Yeah.
So a lot of our languages were lost when the land was colonised. So, but what we do know and what we do is passed down to generation.
Right.
And it's mainly a lot of broken English for urbanised Aboriginals.
Right. And do you think that you have your Australian accent is a little bit different from, say, my accent?
Yeah, I'd say it is.
It's a little bit different.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
I I guess it's just because you've been over in America so long. You're coming back with with the accent.
Yeah, no, it's come up a couple of times where people have asked me about Australian accents, and I said, well, there isn't. People in Melbourne and people in Sydney and Brisbane all sound the same.
Yes.
I said, all I've come up with is that, someone who lives out in, Kingaroy or in the country might have a different accent from someone who lives in the city. And then I also thought, well, some Indigenous people have a different accent as well,
They do.
influenced by different history.
They do. Like Indigenous people that come from New South Wales or the northern New South Wales, they speak differently to Queenslanders. When they're speaking English, they have a more of a twang to their accent than Queensland does.
Right.
So you have, I would say that's probably the only difference that I've ever heard in an Australian accent.
Right.
So and they are more the families that grew up on missions,
Right.
which are which is like a camp where Aboriginal people were forced to go and live when Australia was colonised.
Yeah.
So they were basically put on a mission camp, and where they had to stay, and they had rules where they weren't allowed out of that mission. And
Right.
they were taught by Catholics and
Yeah, raised by different people.
yeah.
Well, thanks for participating in my little project here. It's been
Anytime,
interesting to speak to you. Okay, thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, Murray. Bye.
Bye.